Welcome and thank you for joining us today for our first NCTAF Good Teaching Summit. Today we are focused on strategies to foster teaching success. My name is Melinda George, and I am the president of the National Commission on Teaching in America's Future, or as we call it, NCTAF. We are delighted that you could all join us today for what promises to be a truly collaborative look at good teaching and the conditions that are needed to support good teaching. This is an exciting year for NCTAF. We turned 20 this year, which we're pretty excited about. For the past 20 years, the Commission has focused on what matters most, and that is ensuring that every student has access to quality and caring teachers in schools organized for success. Our history is as an organization that conducts research, makes recommendations, and objectively shares best practices of quality teaching, while also lending our national voice to bring about positive change for the teaching profession. Earlier this year, the NCTAF Commission determined that the time is now for a national investigation and celebration of the teaching profession, and a call to action to support teaching to improve learning for every student. The Commission asked that we do this in three important ways. First, they want it to be collaborative. Second, positive. And third, action-oriented. In the coming weeks and months, NCTAF will put forth a vision of good teaching. We will then count on our partners, current and future, to help contribute to that definition. Then begins the work of identifying the conditions that are needed to support good teaching. A basis for our work will be grounded in the principles of deeper learning. Deeper learning environments are those in which students are using their knowledge and skills in a way that prepares them for real life, college, and career readiness. Many of you are familiar with the term deeper learning, but what does it look like when it is put into practice? And importantly, what are the conditions that need to be in place for a teacher to be able to facilitate learning so that students can achieve the 6 principles of deeper learning? Understanding what we want for students, helping teachers to transform their teaching, and putting in place the conditions for teachers to help students achieve success are critical factors for the Commission as we convene, research, promote best practices, and inspire action over the coming months. Creating the conditions for good teaching, schools organized for success, has been an emphasis for NCTAF since the Commission released its first report, What Matters Most. These conditions were the impetus for the creation of NCTAF's Learning Studios, a reason that you all are here today and that we're going to hear some more about as the day goes on. After years of research around the conditions and strategies to support and foster good teaching, we created Learning Studios as a demonstration project to test whether these conditions would make a difference in teaching and learning. After 6 years of working with school districts in Maryland, New Hampshire, and Virginia, we have learned a lot, and we are excited to share at the national level alongside our partners organizations who are doing very complementary work, more information about these strategies in the hopes that they will be widely adopted and combined in learning environments across the country to support good teaching and learning. One factor that has been consistent in our work and in our learning studios is the critical need for collaboration in teaching. Earlier this summer, NCTAF was pleased to partner with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, for the United States release of the Teaching and Learning International Survey, or TALIS. As I reviewed the TALIS data, I was really pleased to see a positive picture emerging across TALIS countries, and particularly among American teachers, about their satisfaction and confidence levels. However, TALIS also provided us with an understanding of time and time constraints for American teachers and the demands on their time. The TALIS found that U.S. teachers spend more time teaching than any other country, about 27 hours per week or 44% of their time. Now, While on the surface, this may sound reasonable, when you compare the U.S. to other high-performing countries, like Finland, their teachers have significantly more time for collaborating with their peers and engaging in teamwork, and their students are performing better. Since its founding, NCTAF has identified collaboration as critical to schools organized for success and to the ability of teachers to be successful. The desire for and power of collaboration was evident throughout the TALIS findings, and yet in the United States, teaching is still largely reported as an independent profession. This seems to be an area where improvement is being made and could be made and should be made. The NCTAF Commission has long promoted the need for collaborative working environment in schools, whether that plays out as teachers with their peers, teachers and school leaders, or all of the above, and teachers and students. This is a critical element in organizing schools for success, and we need more models, case studies, and examples of where and how collaboration is making a difference. As you are listening to today's presentations and panel discussions, think about your definition of good teaching. What factors do you want to be sure that the Commission includes? What are the conditions under which you think that good teaching can occur? And let us know those. Join in the conversation today and going forward. We will be using Twitter with the hashtag #GoodTeaching. We encourage all of you to Twitter out as we go. And please be sure to mention @NCTAF so that we can make sure that the ideas and things that you feel are really important are getting back to us and to the Commission. This is what's critical, is for us all to come together and really have this conversation about good teaching and how we move American schools and, importantly, every student forward. It's now my pleasure to introduce Lillian Lowry, Maryland State Superintendent of Schools. I'm thrilled to make this introduction because not only do I get to introduce her as Maryland State Superintendent of Schools, but this is the first time that I get to say, and a brand new NCTAF commissioner. Lillian joined the commission this summer, and we are so thrilled to have you. This summer, my colleague Elizabeth Foster and I got to go up and meet with Lillian, and we got to spend some one-on-one time with her. And I have to tell you, we both walked away saying, this is so exciting. She is dedicated, passionate, smart, and she really uses the whole idea of collaboration at the state level to make things happen. And so for us, she's a perfect addition to the NCTAF Commission, and we're so glad you're here. Superintendent Lowry has been the state superintendent in Maryland since 2012. Before that, she was the Secretary of Education in the state of Delaware. In both states, she has focused on teacher leadership and teacher and leader capacity and effectiveness. She has also been a district superintendent, an assistant district superintendent, an administrator, and a middle and high school English teacher. Dr. Lowry, we are so thrilled that you are here with us today. Please join me in welcoming her to the podium.
Good morning. I came in last night because I know about the rush hour traffic around the DC metropolitan area. It is such an honor to be here. I am so honored to be a commissioner, and I too left the meeting with Melinda feeling really pleased that I had become a commissioner, because I need to always be in search of learning from others, and so this network of friends will certainly help benefit the work in Maryland. Welcome to the Good Teaching Summit. Thank you for making time in your busy lives to join us here today. Your attendance today speaks volumes about your interests in continuous improvement for students and the teachers and leaders who touch their lives in schools each day. A special thank you to Melinda George, the president of NCTAF, for inviting me to kick off this terrific event. The idea of good teaching resonates with me. I had the privilege of being a classroom teacher for over 15 years. So now with all the other things that Melinda says, you're counting the dates. Yeah, I'm kind of old. It was as a classroom teacher that I learned the essence of the term lifelong learning, because as I facilitated knowledge acquisition in middle and high school English language arts classrooms, my students taught me how to be an effective teacher in several ways. The most salient lesson was all about relationships. My students and I established wonderful relationships. Yes, we liked each other most days, but more importantly, we respected each other at all times. My students allowed me, from a new teacher to a veteran teacher, to take risks and to try new things. The permission for me to take risks with them afforded them the opportunity to do likewise, to take thoughtful risks and learn something new, not only about the content, but also about themselves. A collaborative teacher-student relationship, as we all know, is vital in the teaching and learning environment. Yet, the leaders who are charged with creating these beneficial learning environments make a profound difference. And I learned that lesson well as a high school principal. As a principal, I depended on teacher and student leaders to be the content expert advisors and to be the guides in how to build school climates that promoted the best in everyone. I risked leading from behind when my time to follow was in the best interest for the path forward. To this day, whenever I need inspiration or I need to know if we're headed in the right direction, I want to hear from our teachers and leaders in the field. They remind me how important it is to seek engagement and collaboration. That is one of the reasons I meet with the Maryland's Teachers of the Year once a month as an advisory group throughout the year. And if you know Teachers of the Year, they're very committed and passionate, and they tell it like it is. They provide me with realistic and honest assessments as to how effective the policies that we are implementing are helpful in improving teaching and learning. But time and time again, the discussions always come back to relationships. Our National Teacher of the Year, Sean McComb, our National Teacher of the Year, who also happens to be a Maryland teacher from Baltimore County, said the following: "My teaching is built on the belief that relationships and engagement can turn challenges into opportunity for excellence for all students. As we embrace the truth, we create citizens who can live the American dream." For me, Sean's words frames the conversations today. In Maryland and in many other states, our teachers are working in a time of transition, and the pace of progress is swift. Our state has collaboratively moved into full implementation of higher academic standards, better state assessments, and more meaningful evaluations anchored by continuous support for teachers and school leaders. As our Maryland Education Association President Betty Weller reminds me, we're doing all three and at the same time. Teachers are being asked to do things differently and to continue learning. While Betty often reminds me that sometimes we must agree to disagree, we work together with our educators and parents, teachers associations to support each other. As a result, we are achieving the results that we are seeking. I learned early on that sustainable change will not happen through top-down directives, but rather through collaboration with our many partners in local school systems, state organizations, and national groups like NCTAF. None of us can do this alone. Respecting the power of collaboration, my staff and I meet regularly in person. When I came on board at both DOE in Delaware and now in Maryland, what I said to my staff is, if I walk through this building and you're in your office, we have a problem. I need for you, with all of this aggressive change going on, to be in the field so that people see that we are partners, that we are not sitting in a bureaucratic environment dictating, but that we're right there with them step by step. So that's where we spend a lot of our time, in person, with teachers, principals, local superintendents, and representatives from local boards of education. We share information and discuss how we might strengthen instruction for our students. Ongoing collaboration is the only sustainable way to make sure that this work outlives all of us. If there's not buy-in from the people that are responsible for this work in the field every day, when the leader goes away, the work goes away, which is why many of our educators become somewhat cynical. Maryland, like a majority of states, adopted the Common Core state standards, and we joined one of the consortia. We joined the consortium Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers, known as PARC, to develop better assessments, not more testing. And let me reemphasize that. We joined these consortia, states who didn't join the consortia but who are going to next generation tests, did that so that we could respond to the voice from the field that we need better assessments to give teachers information around professional development and learning and to help us target what we do for our students. We are not supporting more testing, better testing. We did what many states have done. We began working directly with our local education agencies to prepare for implementation. We were talking when I first came in about PBS and had the pleasure of staffing him when she was at PBS. And I used one of his quotes. And Mr. Blanchard said, "None of us is as smart as all of us." And of course, he's right. Not one of us alone has all the answers. We need the expertise of everyone who touches our schools in any way to improve learning. That is why today's event is so important. We have the opportunity to share with and hear from practitioners at all levels, and of course some of them will be from Maryland, at all levels of the system about their own strategies for maintaining the relationships that help their teachers and students achieve high standards. That is why in Maryland we started the transition to more rigor by actually bringing teams of teachers together from every school in the state for intensive discussion, collaboration, and training 3 years before formal implementation of the new standards. These teachers gave us a sense of direction in providing support. Master teachers from local school systems led many of the sessions during our summer Educator Effectiveness Academies. More than 7,000 teachers took part in the academies during the summers of 2011, 2012, and 2013, and then they were to return to their schools to spearhead the implementation. Through our Race to the Top grant, we provided stipends to these teachers. However, this summer, we had run out of money, yet thousands more teachers returned for additional training on a volunteer basis. And that, to me, is a credit to staff at the department, because if the information and the inclusive way of doing this work wasn't helpful, these teachers wouldn't have shown up. This spring, the new PARC assessments will be fully implemented in all Maryland schools. Again, we provided training in nearly every school, and we field tested the PARC assessment in every single school in our state except 7, and we couldn't there because they are school improvement grant schools, and they had to take the test because we had to report the data. But every school, we even from those 7 schools had folks go to other schools so that they could see what it felt like, what it looked like, and give us feedback. With the help of a national nonprofit education superhighway, we offered every school the opportunity to test its internet bandwidth, big push of the governor and the General Assembly on making sure that they had what they needed for these online tests. We are helping school systems find opportunities to add technology. And as we all know who are in the consortia, the first 3 years will have a paper or pencil option if needed, where technology is not fully embedded in the school environment. So we are getting ready to go further, faster. Now, perhaps the most important work that we're doing, and the work about which we hear the most, is the teacher-principal evaluation. The teacher-principal evaluation can provide meaningful opportunity for professional growth, close persistent achievement gaps, and accelerate growth for all students. And we are having that conversation more in Maryland. We certainly have to focus on closing the achievement gap for our underperforming and at-risk students. But when we compare ourselves through OECD to other countries, I think that 3 states were Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Florida. Even our highest performing children are not performing as well as high-performing students in other countries. So this isn't just about closing the achievement gap for our most challenged students, but making sure that we are competitive globally among all of our students. The major factor in our state's evaluation framework is student learning objectives. And the student learning objectives are key factors agreed upon by teachers and supervisors. Now, there's been a lot of conversation about the use of state assessments, especially as we're making a transition to new assessments. We hear that, we get it, and we've worked very closely with Secretary Duncan. He gets that, he hears it, and we're trying to be thoughtful about how we infuse the state assessments, but that still doesn't back us away from quantitative measures. And why we are preparing ourselves to set baselines for the new assessments, we're working hand in glove with our teachers to look at these student learning objectives because they own that. And it's not just about English language arts and mathematics. Every teacher has student learning objectives for targeted groups of students in their class, whether it's the band teacher, the art teacher, the career and technical education teacher, everyone is included. And these student learning objectives emerge from years of discussion with local superintendents, union leadership, college and university professors, and other stakeholders. Maryland has become a front runner in this emerging work with the help of national expert Bill Slotnick from the Community Training and Assistance Center through WestEd. Bill Slotnick has been working on student learning objectives for over 20 years, and he has come into our state to help us build a common language, common rubrics, and common methods of implementation so that we across the state can target our resources most effectively. In fact, the Maryland State Department of Education joined the State Board of Education to sign a memorandum of understanding with our major education leadership organizations to codify our commitments to successfully implementing the student learning objectives in every classroom and to work together to refine the process. So in addition to the Maryland State Department of Education and the State Board, signatories are Maryland State Education Association, an affiliate of NEA, the Baltimore Teachers Union, the affiliate of AFT, Public Schools Superintendents Association, the Maryland Association of Primary School Administrators, and the Maryland Association of Secondary Administrators, and of course, their local boards of education. It was really momentous, and I think finally the teachers in the field took a deep breath and said, okay, now they're working together. We found something on which we can all agree and move forward. We also launched, as I talked about earlier, Leadership Matters. In meeting with my Teachers of the Year, one of the meetings, a teacher pulled out a card, and she said, oh, I have some questions from my school. And I said, oh, so what's happening? Your colleagues know that you're meeting with the state superintendent, so they're sending questions for you to ask me? She said, no, this is from my principal. And I was horrified. And I said, your principal? He wanted me to ask you, is it really true? And I left and went back to staff and said, we have a problem. When we have the leaders in the school having to glean information from the folks they're supposed to be leading, not good. And so we have launched 2 new programs to bolster principal development after hearing from our teachers that they had more information than their school leaders did. With the help from our partners at West Ed, we launched our first Governors Promising Principals Academy and Principal Leadership Pipeline to support current and aspiring school leaders. In the spirit of collaboration and bringing the right conditions for teaching and learning success to Maryland, I am also so pleased that Maryland has been home to 25 NCTAF STEM learning studios in 5 districts. The cross-disciplinary teams of teachers and outside experts have brought real-world, problem-based learning to hundreds of middle school and high school students, and the findings have been impressive. 78% of the teachers reported that their content and or instructional methods were different from methods used in their traditional teaching. So now our students won't be bored, and they can understand what concept and theory has to do with practical application. 90% of the teachers reported that compared to their overall teaching, their Learning Studios projects had far more real-world applications. 67, these 2 last ones are really profound. 67% of the students get new ideas about what a scientist does. 51% of students got new ideas about what science is. We cannot make assumptions. In closing, educational reform is not a new concept, and we all know that it is not easy, but the work underway is building the foundation for our teachers and students to go further, faster. In Maryland, we are getting it done, and I believe as a nation, we will prepare students to achieve their dreams if we are open to being bound together in this work through collaboration. So thank you again for indulging me this morning, and thanks to NCTAF for letting me be a commissioner. I look forward to a long relationship. Have a great summit. Thank you.
See why we're so excited? It's now my pleasure. I want to thank Dr. Lowry. You are it's a wonderful way to start today and to hear all that's happening in Maryland and the hope that this means for the rest of the country. So we really are appreciative of your being here. It's my pleasure now to introduce my colleague, Elizabeth Foster, who's going to lead us through the next part of the program this morning, which is really going to delve into some of the strategies that were in Learning Studios, but really have been playing out in organizations and partner groups throughout the country. So Elizabeth, let me join. Have you join?
Good morning, everyone. Everyone's got their coffee ready to go. As Melinda said, I'm Elizabeth Foster, and I'm here to give you an overview of what is going to happen next today. But first, we are, sort of ridiculously excited that Dr. Lowry has joined us, and I think that her remarks have really set the stage beautifully for what we're going to hear about this morning. So in a few minutes, you'll hear from 2 panels of experts. First, you will hear from the systems level experts about the strategies that NCTAF believes are critical to facilitating good teaching, professional learning communities, project-based learning, and meaningful work with outside experts. These are the strategies that NCTAF has spent a fair amount of time researching, and these are the strategies that undergird the Learning Studios work. The Learning Studios, as both Melinda and Dr. Lowry have mentioned, are teams of teachers working across content areas and with external experts. So they've worked with folks from NASA and NIH to bring in some external, some real-world workforce data, experiences, and to really work closely with teachers in the design and implementation of their projects. So the Learning Studios have been testing this idea that a purposeful alignment and integration of different strategies would be more effective than a single strategy alone. That a learning team that focused intently on a project-based learning progression would be able to help students more than a learning community without that type of focus. In addition, the STEM professional idea was sort of an interesting addition to a traditional professional learning community or a team of teachers. Those professionals have come in from other industries and really worked closely with the teachers to design their learning experiences, and it's turned out to be really project-based learning for the teachers in some cases, where the teachers have been able to sit together, figure out a particular problem, and address that problem by bringing in additional resources. So what you'll hear today is more information about the learning studios and the day-to-day work of the teachers. But our goal throughout the day is really to draw connections to the research, to other programs, to other initiatives, and sort of start building, as Melinda said, this momentum towards a collaborative and collective definition of good teaching and the conditions that support good teaching. So the experts on our first panel will take a particular strategy and provide you with an in-depth look at their own research and experience in that strategy. But then they'll also talk specifically about the alignment and integration with other strategies. We'll then learn even more about implementation and support at the district, school, and classroom level with our second panel, where we'll have individuals from school teams, the classroom level, and the district level. These panels will be followed by a presentation by our research partner, Dr. Emmerling, in the back, about how individuals from local communities and industries have contributed to the Learning Studios teaching teams, and how what we've learned from that work can influence the work of others. Now, to really get us started, I'd like to introduce Roberto Rodriguez. Many of you know him, but I'll give you a short bio, and then he can tell you more about himself when he comes up. Roberto serves in the White House Domestic Policy Council as the Deputy Assistant to the President for Education, where he coordinates the administration's education policy initiatives from early learning through college and career training. And based on our conversation earlier this morning, I think he does everything all the time with everyone. So that's basically, I could have just said that, I guess. Earlier in his career, Roberto was the Chief Education Counsel to Senator Edward Kennedy, Chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, which we're all quite familiar with right now. Roberto managed the Democratic education agenda for the committee and led policy development and legislative strategy on, again, everything, all the time, everywhere. Early childhood, higher education, adult education, research and policy development, and working at the federal, state, and local level. So we are thrilled to have Roberto here today. He'll come up and introduce the other panelists right now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Good morning, everyone. I am thrilled to be here. I want to begin by thanking NCTAF for hosting this important discussion and recognizing and thanking Melinda George for her leadership here. We're really excited to be, our administration is really excited to be part of this conversation about how we strengthen and support our teachers and advance the practice in our classrooms across the country. We believe it's a critical policy agenda item and important for moving our country forward to really realize all of the goals that we have around a great public education system that benefits all kids and all parents. I also want to recognize and congratulate and thank Dr. Lowry for her leadership in Maryland. It's wonderful to hear of the tremendous progress underway in the state. Our administration is proud to be a small part of that with the Race to the Top funding. And I think Maryland is one of the, among the Race to the Top states, one that is really advancing just a tremendous amount of vision and change and support for teachers and for students. And we're very excited about that work as well. So, you know, we're at this time of tremendous progress, not only in Maryland, but really across the country, in our system as we really look at how education can be an engine for moving our economy forward. And, we have had a tremendous amount of work underway in our public education system over the past years. And I just want to recognize where we are in terms of the progress of that system as a backdrop to today's conversation. We are at a place today where our dropout rates are at an all-time low. Our graduation rates as a country are at an all-time high, over 80% for our four-year cohort graduation rates. Student achievement is rising in many communities in many states across the country, and college enrollment is rising. And we're seeing some of the most remarkable gains made for some of our students that are from our most disadvantaged backgrounds, as well as for a number of our African American and Latino students. We're seeing progress made and beginning to realize and advance equity and opportunity in our system. So that's a tremendously encouraging sign. It also is a sign, though, that we have to continue down the path for systemic reform. The president has challenged us to really do more to raise our expectations across our public education system, hold ourselves and our students to the standards that we know are needed for success in today's economy, making sure that we are doing more to bridge and close the data gap that we see in many of our schools and in many of our districts in terms of really being able to collect information and know where our students are and develop a strategy for how to get them ahead. Doing more to make sure that we are taking on an agenda for real progress in some of our lowest performing schools. And of course, making sure that we are doubling down on one of the most important components of systemic reform, which is doing more to attract, to prepare, to develop, and to advance our teachers and our human capital, our principals, as the single most important resource we can give our young people. We're also at a time of tremendous change, and I think Dr. Lowry really described the efforts underway in Maryland. They are, I think, reflective of the broader change that we're seeing across the country. We have 48 states and the District of Columbia this fall that are teaching to higher college and career ready standards than was previously the case. Now, some states are further along, and some districts are further into that process than others, but undoubtedly, we have our teachers teaching and our students learning to higher expectations today. We have new assessments that are underway that are being adopted in states across the country, and through our administration's ESEA waiver process and program, we have over 40 states that are forging new accountability systems to differentiate and provide support to learners across their state and to recalibrate their systems to a new goal of college and career readiness. So, as we see that change underway, it also reminds us that we have to, in order to really enable every one of our young people to reach those higher expectations, we really need to rethink the learning experience for our students. And we need to challenge ourselves to do more to really recognize the imperative, which is that our educational experience demands a different approach than it did a generation ago. We have still too many of our young people who are not meaningfully engaged or motivated in their academic experience, while many of our other international competitors endeavor to offer a rigorous and a relevant education to their students. So we have to do more essentially to engage, prepare, inspire our students to develop the deep knowledge and the skills that they'll need to be successful. And that requires adopting new designs and new approaches to learning, better connections between the classroom and the application of knowledge, new opportunities for collaboration for our students and for our teachers. We are endeavoring as a policy community and as an administration to try to do more to challenge and embrace vision for redesigning our high schools to better calibrate to some of these principles. We're trying to do more to connect our schools to high-speed broadband and high-speed internet so that we can better personalize learning and provide opportunities for individualized teaching and learning. And trying to do more to make sure that we're re-envisioning our career and technical education system and making sure that we're putting career alongside college as important aspirations and engaging our young people early in a vision about their future. But at the heart of all of this is the integral role that our teachers play in our students' success. And we're committed to attracting, retaining, supporting, developing a world-class teaching workforce. The time to act is now. We know that we have to embrace a new vision for teaching and learning. In this decade alone, 1.6 million teachers will retire. 1.6 million new teachers will take their place. If we move forward successfully, the passion that teachers bring to their classrooms will directly relate to the advancement of their students and of our society as a whole. So over the next hour, I'm really proud to be leading and facilitating a conversation here with three outstanding experts who will discuss some systemic levers to promoting collaboration and transformation of our profession around these three principles that you heard about this morning, around how we do more to advance our professional learning communities in our schools, what we can do to provide greater opportunities for project-based learning for our students, and how we can really build bridges of collaboration with outside experts to enrich and support teaching and learning in our classrooms. So I would love to bring up with me now the three panelists that I will introduce briefly to lead our discussion in that effort. And let me first invite Renee Islas to join us. Renee is Senior Vice President of Research, Development, and Demonstration at Learning Forward. And Renee leads the consulting division of Learning Forward. He also developed the Pathway to Achievement, which is a successful school improvement framework that is currently being implemented in K-12 systems across our country. Prior to joining Learning Forward, Renee was Senior Vice President of an international consulting firm where he launched their K-12 education practice. His past experience includes time in government, where he and I first met, and he served as Chief of Staff to the Assistant Secretary of Education in 2005 and 2006, and played a really pivotal role in forging some of the important programs, discretionary programs focused on teachers under the Bush administration, including the Teacher Incentive Fund and the School Improvement Grant Program. So welcome, Renee. Thank you for joining us. Second, I would like to welcome Alan Veach, who's the Director of Regional Development at the New Tech Network. Hi, Alan. And as Director of Regional Development, Alan's primary focus is growing and sustaining the New Tech Network of schools in Ohio, in Indiana, in Michigan, here in the district, and also in Arkansas. New Tech works with 167 schools across 23 states to develop and utilize project-based learning as a primary mode of instruction, to build a culture that empowers students, and to support those students with one-to-one technology that will enhance their learning. New Tech also supports school district leaders in developing partnerships with business leaders to impact project development and lead to real-world connections for students. Alan was the founding principal of Bloomington New Tech in Bloomington, Indiana, and he also has worked as an assistant principal, guidance counselor, and science teacher at large in many of our suburban and urban high schools. And then finally, I'd like to welcome up to the stage Dr. Donna Morell, who's a director of Encore Fellowships at ESC of New England. Welcome, Donna. Dr. Morell brings over 25 years of experience in executive leadership and program development in her role as director of Encore Fellowships at ESC. In her primary career at PK-12 Education, she was a classroom teacher, a school principal, a curriculum leader, and a superintendent of schools. And she achieved recognition through an outstanding program that we have here at the federal level called the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics Teaching. During her tenure, she was also the first female superintendent in Cumberland, Rhode Island, where she developed a student-centered decision-making framework characterized as 100% of the students, 100% of the time. So we welcome Donna and welcome Renee and Alan. Let's give them a round of applause. So we're going to begin our discussion here, and I'm going to just begin with some brief time here with our panelists and ask them to share with us some of the strategies and approaches that they have used to support the three principles that we discussed here earlier. Professional learning communities, project-based learning, and teaming and working with outside experts. How have you really fostered collaboration through those principles? And share with us a little bit of a thumbnail sketch of the results that you've seen as a product of that work. And we'll start with Renee.
Thank you, Roberto, and thanks, NCTAF and Dr. Lowry. Just wanted to start out by introducing you to Learning Forward, or reintroducing you to Learning Forward. Many of you knew us under a previous name called National Staff Development Council. Does that sound familiar?
Sure does.
Been around for 40 years, working on one thing. And that one thing we sharpened into a new motto that I'd like all of you to repeat as well. That new motto is better teaching every day. Can you say it? Better teaching.
Better teaching
every day.
Every day.
That's a very clear, succinct way of telling what we are about. We're not about new teachers or bringing hiring practices or those kinds of things. We're about how do you improve teaching in schools on a daily basis so that students can achieve, so that schools get better every single day. And we do this in a couple different ways. The first is by supporting our members. We support our members who are those frontline professional developers out in the field who are looking for research-based practices to improve adult learning and ultimately improve practice and student learning. We support educators in the field in general to build systems of professional learning. And then finally, we publish cutting-edge resources based on research that are really practical tools for implementing effective professional learning. My boss hates it when I say this, but we are a professional learning organization that does not offer professional development. We build systems. And so we focus our effort at the state and at the district level to make sure that these collaborative systems are in place where teachers can work together to improve their teaching every day. So I wanted to start a little bit about our knowledge that we've gleaned over the 40 years about professional development. Many of you are familiar with it. You know professional development, or at least the past information about professional development in kind of these categories or stages of different learning experiences. The first is demonstration or exposure to theory. When it comes to the Common Core, we often go in front of teachers and say, these are the new standards. Put them up on a slide deck, about 100 slides for all of those standards, and say, okay, learn them. That only gets about 5% of likelihood of a teacher understanding what was in that 100-page slide deck and turning it into changes in their practice. 5%. Then there's the opportunity to actually see those standards in action through demonstration. That increases it to maybe about 10% of the likelihood of transferring that new knowledge into practice. Then we have allowed teachers to practice that information. Again, that increases it, increases the likelihood of implementation to some level, but not dramatically. And then feedback. Feedback gets you about 40% of a chance that a teacher gets that new knowledge and turns it into practice. If we are able to add all of those things up, theory, demonstration, practice, feedback, and then layer on top of that coaching, we can get to 90% of a likelihood that a teacher will accept that new information and put it into practice in a consistent way in their teaching. Now, all of those different things that I mentioned cannot be done in isolation, but often are, and we call it professional development. That's why we at Learning Forward are really focused on making sure that we create structures and systems and put those in place where a teacher, all teachers in a school, can experience all 5 of those stages of learning together, so that we can get to more than 10%, more than 5%, more than 40%, but really a high likelihood, 90% of teachers taking new information, new knowledge, things like the Common Core, things like effective practice, and putting them into practice in a sustained way. PLCs, this is PLC, the way we think of it. If you put those 5 things into place, one of the most efficient ways to do that is through professional learning communities. But we have a fear at Learning Forward. The fear is that PLC has become a commonplace term across the United States. And we know when things become, the stated norm, they no longer are that pure form that we all think about. That pure form we want to put back into place is to make sure that all of us, all of you, emphasize the L in PLC, and that L is learning. We want to make sure that learning becomes intentional, that it's not just any longer professionals meeting together, drinking coffee, and being collegial. We want them learning and changing their practice and implementing those things through those 5 different stages of learning that I mentioned before. And more importantly, I want to say that PLCs, when done right, can actually efficiently, cost-effectively make sure that teachers get exposure to those 5 stages of learning. I want to mention a couple of the barriers that exist to effective PLCs. The first and most common thing that we hear is time. You heard it up on the PISA and OECD TALIS report, that time in the United States for doing things other than instructing students is really small in comparison to the highest performing countries. We need more teachers learning together, coaching each other, giving each other feedback, so that their students, the time that they spend with their students, actually becomes more impactful and effective. The other things are things like willpower, our command and control, thinking that we can just move on to schools and say, implement this, teachers. That doesn't work without those other supports that exist. And then finally, the culture of isolation that is both structural in our schools. We talk about that egg cart notion in our schools and how they're structured. That reinforces this culture where I, as a teacher, will stand by myself and do better myself for my students. That is the reason why in our motto, better teaching every day, we don't say better teachers, we say better teaching, so that there's a collective growth in the quality of teaching. Finally, I want to just quickly run through, as Roberto mentioned, what are some of the things that need to happen in order for effective PLCs to happen. The first is continuous improvement. We need to establish a culture of continuous improvement where there's data, shared goals, implementation, and evaluation happening in schools by teachers every day. The second is collective responsibility. We want to make sure that we shift from just an individual teacher or an individual classroom to all teachers within the school taking responsibility for each of the students in their charge. We need to have healthy, peer-based accountability. It's no longer just that command and control, but we need to empower educators to hold each other accountable for improving every day. We know that principals are in charge and responsible for many teachers, many schools, many parents. in order to be able to diffuse that responsibility in a way that you actually get healthy coaching and feedback, we need to put teachers back in charge of supporting each other. We want to empower them. We want to also accept experimentation within our schools. I often say that our schools now require both the professionals and the students to become hackers. They need to create within their system. They need to figure out how pieces fit together and put them together so that students learn and that teachers improve every day. And then finally, alignment and accountability. Dr. Lowry mentioned that she set a very clear vision at the top in Maryland. And now all of the educators are from the district superintendents all the way down to the classroom teachers know what their target is and are working together in order to get there. And finally, I just want to say that PLCs are really project-based learning for teachers, right? And so all of these things, all of these strategies, getting external support from experts outside of your classroom are things that you put together in an effective PLC to make sure that students improve, but from our perspective, that we have better teaching every day. So thank you for this time.
Great. Great. Thank you, Renee. All right. Alan, let's hear from you.
Great, thank you. Again, thanks for the opportunity to be here today. And, you know, I think what was surprising to me most, maybe not surprising, is that Melinda and her team, when we were talking on the phone and kind of midway through the conversation, just realized that we have the exact same beliefs, that when we think of creating a learning studio in a classroom, that's what as an organization we believe and hold so strongly is what makes a good education for a student, for a learner. And so for us, New Tech Network, we were founded in 1996, really out of a workforce development need in Napa, California. A group of businessmen came together and said, we're getting students who graduate with content knowledge, but they lack the skills, they lack the work ethic, they lack the communication that we need for them to be effective employees or to be effective when they go on to career and college ready. And so from that conversation, the first school was started, and that school is still up and going today in Napa and is being very successful. And so from there, we've moved to 167 schools nationwide. Those schools run the gamut from here in Washington, D.C. at H.D. Woodson, where we have a small learning community that's just a baby school that started this year, to rural Cross County, Arkansas, where we have a school that has just less than 100 students per grade level, and they've committed their entire school to thinking about how do we do education differently. And so for us, at the heart of what we do, we're a school development organization, and we work with school districts or charter organizations to totally reimagine an entire school or a part of a school. And so as we've been a little bit talking here, so for us it's more than project-based learning, that if you really want to see school change, you've got to bundle buckets of change together in order to get to impact. That you can bundle project-based learning in a classroom and you're going to impact some kids, but to impact all kids, you need to change an entire school. And so for us, when we work with districts, it's not about just doing project-based learning, but it's about doing project-based learning in an environment that is very much business-like, that involves kids collaborating very closely around core content areas that have this heavy infusion of what is real in their community in this local context. And it's about creating an environment where not only the kids are working really closely together, but you're talking about the adults are working really closely together well, that we're breaking down walls from classrooms, literally breaking down walls. We want our schools to create integrated classrooms where we have two teachers from core content areas, or even being more creative. We have schools in Cleveland that pair biology and art in the same classroom. And it's not that you have a biology teacher and an art teacher teaching like this, but that you have a biology and an art teacher teaching like this, that they lay their standards side by side and say, how can we make biology and art real to these kids? And how can we do that in the local context of our community? And so in Cleveland, at New Tech West in Cleveland, they're partnering with a local organization around helping clean up the riverfront, or not the river, excuse me, the lakefront. And what are those pollutants in that lakefront? And what's the volume of pollutants in our lakefront? And students then will work together in a collaborative group, and they'll make a presentation, not to their peers or to their teachers, but they'll make a presentation to this organization about recommendations for cleaning up the lakefront. So students in our schools are engaged in real-world project-based learning, where they not only work with teachers but community members. And I think that makes, as we were talking earlier, that makes the learning so much more real for kids, because teachers don't have to ask or answer the question why. And so for those of us who've been teachers, we've always been or been in that classroom where students come up to us and say, why do I have to learn about mitochondria? Being a former biology teacher, I remember that one well. Now kids understand the why, because they're not doing the work for their teachers, they're doing the work for an outside agency. So when we work with developing schools, we think of the one leg that our schools stand on is project-based learning. The second piece that we really feel heavily about is this idea of creating a culture where students have choice and voice. Students in the classroom can't be the holders of the knowledge and can't be the ones that make the entire decision if you want students to be engaged. So our schools work to create a culture that we call that is business-like. And you'll see this reflected in the structures of our school. Schools don't have to, and students don't have to learn in a 900 square foot classroom. And they don't have to learn in a classroom where there's always a teacher watching every move that they make. We can allow our teachers to own their own learning through the use of a piece of technology where they can take their group and they can go to an unstructured space and they can learn together and research together and even laugh and have fun together because they're kids and they're going to do that. And then they can bring that knowledge back to that classroom to that teacher and share. And so for us, you can't have students learning in an innovative environment if they're constrained to a box with desks and rows. That if project-based learning has to be done well, you have to give up that control to the kids, and you have to push them to go out and think and be a part of their own. A third part of our kind of belief is that technology is a tremendous tool. And I think that all of us that have been in education have experienced a technology rollout where teachers walk into the classroom and suddenly find a room full of 32 kids with iPads that no matter how hard we try, they will get to Facebook, whether we like it or not. The best filter out there can't keep a teenager off of Facebook. It's my belief in that. But through our model of project-based learning is you give kids a piece of technology to use with a purpose. And that you help those teachers and you provide the professional development to those teachers so that they understand that that technology can be their best friend because it takes them out of that role of being the holder of all the knowledge. And we often think of bowling with bumpers. So those of you who have been bowlers and experienced bowling with bumpers, that using technology and project-based learning, you don't just send a group of kids off into the hinterland with Google, but as a teacher, as a facilitator, you provide those bumpers that guide them and guide their learning. And so through our organization, as we work closely with those schools and those school districts, we end up with a school who's heavily infused with project-based learning. We call it wall-to-wall. That when a student walks in the door of one of our schools, they're going to get project-based learning from the moment they walk in the door to the moment that they graduate. That they're going to get a culture where they have a real choice in what they learn, and they have a voice in how they demonstrate what they've learned. And then the third piece is that they're going to have that technology along the way. And so, in thinking about how do you go from a traditional school with desks and rows to a school that looks like this, it doesn't happen overnight. And as we mentioned earlier, it requires a significant amount of professional development. That if you just walk in the door, have a teacher walk into the door of that classroom and expect them to suddenly know how to just begin doing that, or you expect a leader to walk into that school and expect to understand what's it really like to lead a school where students have voice and choice, that we set them up for failure from the start. And so that in order to get there, we believe as teachers, as designers, and principals as designers. But we also believe in providing the scaffolding through a significant amount of professional development that helps them understand what are those steps that you need to take in order to get to that place in the future. And so through our work with teachers and leaders early on, we've got to the place now where we're pretty good at designing schools. And we see kids that graduate from our schools have a significantly higher persistent rate at both 2-year and 4-year colleges than their peers. And they have a higher graduation rate as well. And so thinking about the future for us, what we've also realized that just a school is no longer good enough. That we can go into a district and we're really good at creating a school, but we also understand for that school to be sustainable and to impact more kids in a community, that you have to begin thinking about how to change a district. And how do you begin to create this relationship between district and school where they're learning together? And that it's not a school PLC where teachers are working together and talking about work, but it's also a district PLC where superintendents and principals and assistant superintendents are sitting down at a table and not just sharing information, but what we would like to see them do is actually looking at student work. We're a firm believer that if you're going to do a PLC, you should be looking at the student work that your kids are doing, because how do you know if kids are graduating college ready unless you're looking at the work they're doing as a staff? And so the next iteration for us as we continue to grow is to go from just developing schools to think about developing districts that are thinking about all these things, project-based learning, student voice and choice, and technology in a really coherent way with their staff. And so we're excited about that. I think we've got a lot to learn as an organization about that, but we do think that if we get to our goal, which is 100% of kids graduating career and college ready, we know that it's got to be more than one school at a time because there's too many schools. But it can be district at a time as we go. So thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Alan. And Donna.
Thank you. Appreciate the invitation this morning. Melinda, it was great to meet you, and also Dr. Lowry, to listen to your comments this morning. I really feel like I'm in the right place, and appreciate the invitation to try to connect some of my background as an education practitioner with some of the work that I do now as an encore careerist, and to hear the idea of experts in the field working with education as the place that an encore careerist might connect is a really smart choice. Actually, I was thinking about the bio when you talked about it, and it probably could have just used one word to introduce me as terms of what I do right now, and that's I'm a matchmaker. And when you just use the word relationships, that's what I do in my work right now. I think about the relationship between people who have been in a primary career and think about the expertise that they have, and I try to match them with the culture and the need in an organization where they're going to try to work, either in a paid or an unpaid situation. And in this instance, we're trying to think about the education sector. So I want to try to propose this morning that those work sites could be classrooms, schools, at the district level or at the state level, because we support learning at all of those levels. And having been in all of those levels myself, because I was both a kindergarten teacher and I worked all the way through the superintendency, I think there's a place to support good teaching across all of those places. And I'm hoping that when you leave this morning that perhaps some of my remarks can help you understand how people who are looking for encore careers bring that outside expertise to, or want to bring that outside expertise to education through their first careers and their training. And I want you to understand what some of the current research is around the availability of encore careerists, and I'd like to propose some theory of action and some general operating principles on how to approach that. So first of all, just to have a common definition of what someone is who is seeking an encore career, it's generally someone who wants work in their midlife or mid-career with a social impact. And that can be across all kinds of areas. It could be human services, it could be any nonprofit organization that has a social impact mission, and in this instance, we're talking about education. And the social impact, obviously, is the learning improvement for students who have both gaps in their learning and the general idea of improving education overall and measuring that, because the idea of having metrics to measure that is really important. The research comes out of an organization that I'm associated with, which is encore.org. And if you want to leave here today and do any further research about where the pool of encore careerists is, I would encourage you to do that. There are two paths to an encore career, and one is really anyone who has had a primary career and they want to go on to a second or third career. And then there's this national organization called encore.org that actually advocates the concept of an encore career. And recently they did a study, they do it every 3 years, and there's several points that I think are important to know. And so if you're thinking, well, are there people out there that are interested in doing this? There actually have been measured that there are 21 million individuals that are seeking encore careers. So the pool of support is really, really deep. And there are 4.5 million people that self-identify as actually being in encore careers right now. And I think that's incredibly substantial. Also, since the study was done in 2011, the percentage of individuals who see themselves in encore careers has grown by 17%. So as a resource for supporting education, this is on a positive trajectory in terms of whether or not there are outside experts who want to support education. The statistics of people who actually say, yes, education is the arena that I want to work, is about 6% of that total. So the current number that would say that I'm working in an encore career of that 4.5 million is 6% in education. People who say I'm impacting multiple generations in my encore career is about 62%. That could obviously cross over into education. The number that say I'm working with adults is about 15%, and I know I was talking to someone here this morning that's related to the Encore organization that has a background that is in that arena. Young adults, which it's interesting how people identify themselves, would be about 4%. And then, of course, we have other kinds of organizations that make up the balance of that. And in terms of the personal motivation for individuals, it's sometimes financial. It's sometimes around the purpose and need in the organizations. And so listening to what my colleagues have talked about, the idea of having the professional learning community or the structure that you have with the actual schools, I think that's really important because some individuals are drawn to the structure themselves in terms of the kind of work that they want to do. Most of these individuals that are looking for an encore career, that have the level of expertise that are going to support education, want to think about ways that they know that their impact can be measured. And they also want to think about the fact that they're going to be valued. And so thinking about the attributes that you talked about in a professional learning community, being part of that collaborative system can often be one of the motivators for someone in an encore career and a way to actually bring their expertise to the education system. So I'd like to propose a couple of operating principles from my own experience in terms of how to bring the encore careerists and outside experts to this work. And I just want to say that I found it interesting that some of the things that you have already brought up this morning are the exact strategies that I was going to propose. So first of all, the idea is to stay focused on learner needs. And the idea of focusing around students as opposed to adult needs, which can be controversial, obviously, in our system in terms of what we develop our structures around. But the idea of developing a theory of action around the needs of the students is, to me, the first most important reason that we think about encore careerists. I mean, we bring adults into the system for very many reasons, but to address student needs is the most important reason. So if we build the system of supports that we need around identifying student needs, then encore careerists are a logical solution because they have the expertise that we need. And so you can think of a range of issues. At the classroom level, it could be as a data analyst. In the PLC, you talked about looking at student work. sometimes when you're looking at student work, the idea is to actually develop that skill for teachers so there can be a transfer of knowledge there. At the district level, it could be to help build human capital systems. We have outside experts that have the HR knowledge that, in fact, our own internal individuals may not be lacking, but could certainly develop in a stronger way and address the gaps that might exist. And also, we may look at short-term assignments that individuals might be interested in filling. Another principle that I think leads from that is the idea of identifying exemplars. So the idea of an outside expert coming from Encore Careers probably exists right now in your school systems and across classrooms and districts. And if you are intentional about wanting to bring these kinds of experts and grow the pool of experts, then I would suggest if you create a narrative that identifies them and talks about where these success stories are, then it will lead to additional people being drawn to want to do this kind of work. Without connecting the dots in that way, then it's unlikely that you'll be able to increase the pool as rapidly. And I do think that Encore Careerists are a really strong method for accelerating resources in the district. And then lastly, I think that leads to the idea of creating clear, structured assignments and opportunities. And to do that, I think that you have to have selection criteria, and I think you have to have very well-defined outcomes, which obviously relate to the measures of student achievement, but can often be qualitative instead of quantitative. And those three things married together, I think, design a nice plan for thinking about how outside experts in the form of Encore Careerists can be supporting the strategies that we're talking about this morning and supporting student learning improvements.
Great. Thank you, Donna. Wonderful. What a great conversation, and I love how all of you really, the thread across all of your comments is the spirit of collaboration and how we can try to do more to promote collaboration within our professional workforce as well as for our students and our learners to be more effective and to be more successful. So we want to spend some time hearing from the audience in terms of your questions for the panelists. So please prepare those and give some thought to the questions you'd like to delve deeper in the short time that we have left. I want to, I think there are a few themes that have, for me, were really salient in your remarks. The first is the theme of this need for a systemic approach. It's not just one strategy or one principle that any of you are employing to be successful. It's really thinking about a very systemic way to address this. And it's an exciting notion. I think all of you have described an environment for professional collaboration and support, and an environment for learners that is still a departure from our status quo in most of our schools, right? I think it's a wonderful vision for change, and I'm intrigued by the process by which I think we could spend a lot of time really in a conversation about how you've really supported change at the local level, how you get principals and teachers and students to embrace a vision of something different than what they've been doing in the past. And certainly you all have wonderful examples. I think the examples that Encore has developed and disseminated around adjunct teachers, around coaches for students and for teachers is some great school-based examples. The president visited Maine or New Tech down in Austin, Texas, and was really excited about the approaches there. And the professional learning communities, Renee, that Learning Forward has done and developed in some of our districts is really exciting. So my question here, just to kick us off, is around scale. We have these various examples of wonderful work. share with us, maybe, and this is for any of you, one opportunity or one challenge that can be addressed to really do more to bring the approaches that you spoke about to scale at a larger scale. I mean, this is something that we wrestle with as a policy community here in DC all the time, is how do we engender that change across the country? Any thoughts?
I'm just going to start out with the example from Maryland. I mean, bringing the work to scale, bringing the Common Core in your case, but the culture shift that it takes for everybody to work together on this common problem, it takes setting a common problem first. And so states like Maryland that established that common vision, states like Kentucky that started out with a common problem but then set a policy framework that they established to support teachers working together, are ways to get that scale. So I think the very first most important thing, and the thing that the White House and states are moving forward on, is setting that common vision for what we expect of children with these new standards.
That's great. Thanks, Renee. Alan or Donna?
Yeah, I would just add to that and think about kind of from our perspective. One of the things I think a way to get to scale is to have a model, somewhat like we do, so that you're not a district or school trying to create everything from scratch. So you already have a collaborative group of individuals that you can go to rely on. But I also think, as I mentioned, that the piece of that is the next level is building that internal capacity, and so that it's districts owning this, and so that professional development targeted at that district level so that they can then begin developing their own schools. So we go from a school development organization to thinking about teaching districts to become school development organizations so that they can impact all schools within a district K-12.
District culture. Great. Thank you, Donna.
Well, I think it connects to Alan's comment, which is the idea of exemplars. And where there's an idea in a district or an intention, if someone were to leave here today and think, well, I'd like to explore the idea of an outside expert, or I'd like to explore the idea of an Encore careerist supporting the learning improvements in my school or classroom, where do I begin? So if there are exemplars that I can look to, then I have a starting point.
Good. Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead to the audience and would love to hear your thoughts, your questions for the panelists here. And looking to the microphone. Mm-hmm. We'll start with Reggie. How are you?
Hi, Reggie Felton, National School Boards Association. Thanks again for sharing the dreams and the innovations. And certainly as school boards, from our real world, there are many political and financial fights to bring about the kind of changes you're talking about. Can you share with us some of the, let's just call them some of the roadblocks that you've identified and how you dealt with them? And secondly, can you share with us your funding sources in terms of what makes you continue to operate?
Okay. Let me talk about professional learning communities and what school districts have done that are successful exemplars for the country. I think I'm going to go back to Kentucky, the state of Kentucky, both at the state school board level as well as the local school boards, have really created their own professional learning communities in concert with the practitioners at the school level. So they're working together to identify their issue of creating more time in schools and creating the flexibility for the scheduling. They're working through this issue collaboratively. So it's not just the school board deciding that we're going to create or establish planning time for schools. It's actually sitting down together and planning this with the practitioners in the classroom. You know, there's different governance models and having to worry about that, but it's what we found is when they work together, the school board members with the teachers themselves and the parents, that you can actually establish these relationships where things like time and money don't become the issue anymore. And it's because of refocusing their priorities on making sure that learning is happening for adults and students. When that shift in response or in focus occurs, the sky's the limit on what you can change structurally to make it happen. And so I would, don't have a lot of time to go into how Kentucky did it, but I would encourage all of you to look at Kentucky as an exemplar that scaled things from the state level to the federal, or to the district level and down to the school level by having collaborative communities between the positions of authority, like the school board, the superintendent, all the way down to the classroom.
Great, thank you, Renee. Others on that particular question?
I think we talked a little bit beforehand, and I think any time that you incorporate a significant change within a school, you have parents who look at that and say, that's really different than the way I learned. And those same parents go to their school board members and say, that's really different than the way that I learned. And so what we've learned along the way is you have to involve school board members and parents early on, that change can't happen in isolation, that if you're expecting teachers to teach through project-based learning, which is a significant shift for most teachers, that you have to educate your community from the minute you begin having that conversation, so that you go on that journey together, and it's not seen as a school doing something drastically different, but the community recognizing that need to do that for their students.
Great. Let's take another question for our panel.
Thank you. I'm Stephanie Norby from the Smithsonian, and my question is, what is the role of technology in building professional learning communities around doing project work that include experts? And if you have any exemplars of where you think technology has been used particularly well to accomplish that.
I think technology is opening up a lot of opportunity when it comes to professional development. You can accelerate the process. I talked about those 5 different learning models that exist, from demonstration to exposure to theory, which are all critical. A lot of that can happen without being constrained with location, time, space, all of those things. And so we're seeing new models where different providers are putting up those demonstrations in a video-based format that teachers watch on their own time, create their own engagement with that tool, and then come back to the team to process that feedback, that coaching. So it's an infusion of new knowledge that I think, and access to knowledge that technology is really facilitating. But it's also, I think, on a cultural side, breaking down the barriers of teachers working individually by themselves. Through technology and allowing teachers to connect with people and experts beyond the borders of their school is just changing the culture dramatically. And so to see teachers working together in New England to the West Coast, it's amazing to see that kind of interaction that technology is facilitating.
And I would say yes. And I would add, for us, it's also been a big issue that we realized around equity of access, that districts that have funding to send staff to professional development across the U.S., and we have districts that there's no way that they could send their staff. And so as an organization, we look back at that as, so how can we make that space, time, money no longer an issue in getting teachers access to that rich professional development and an opportunity to collaborate? And for us, technology is that answer.
Terrific, thank you.
One comment I would make is I represent an aspect of Encore Careerists that is a program called Encore Fellowships. And it's a very specific pathway to an Encore career. So what we're seeing is individuals who may come out of the high-tech industry, and they're looking to transition their skills into roles that would, for example, be invaluable to an organization like the Smithsonian at various levels, as well as in roles in schools, data analysis, building technology systems, and supporting classrooms and so forth. They have really deep functional technical expertise around the use of technology, and it varies in the types of interests that they have in transitioning to an encore career.
Great. We have maybe time for one more question. Can we go to one more question? Yes, you in the back.
Hi, Raj Boya, IT consultant and instructor. Collaboration seems to be the theme this morning. I have two questions. One is, given the unemployment situation, especially for four-year college grads, what kind of collaborative effort do you think needs to be there between colleges and businesses to improve their job opportunities? And the second question is student debt. Based on my conversations with some students, they were like, well, had I known then this is where I would be, I probably would not have pursued a four-year college degree. $60,000, $150,000 debt. So are there any efforts to teach high school students basic money management techniques and basic finance so that probably they don't get into this kind of student debt, which is really burdensome?
Both great questions. We know student debt is on the rise across the country. I think in particular this question around collaboration with employers and with post-secondary education. Any reflections from our panel on that?
Well, I think that one of the things that we think about when we think career and college ready, so for us, we've broken down that to aware, eligible, and prepared. And that when students are in a school, many of them will have few if any models of what does it mean to be a professional. So I grew up in a very rural community. For me, a professional was a teacher. I didn't see professionals other places, and we have other examples of that. And so when you think of career and college ready, it's more than just the academics, but exposing students to careers early on and what it takes to be that career. So for us, college ready, we want every one of our students to graduate with the opportunity to go to a four-year college. That doesn't mean that's the right choice for every student. And so how do you bridge that gap, or how do you make students aware of that debt? Is early on begin that process of opening the options up for them, exposing them to professionals, exposing them to careers, so that when they get to that choice, they can make the choice that's right to them, not only that's right for them, and they understand what it takes to get there.
Great. Thank you, Alan. And now let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you. I think a very exciting vision for increasing the capacity for our teaching workforce and supporting collaboration as a means to enhance teaching and learning. So thank you, all three of you, very much. I'm going to go ahead and turn the program back over to Elizabeth. Thank you.
Okay, so now everyone needs to do a big stretch. It's Monday morning. We really appreciate you all being here on an early Monday morning. And we really appreciate Roberto. He's had to run out. I think what this means is that President Obama thinks it's okay for me to stay here now, so I'll continue and moderate the second panel. I'm really thrilled, actually, to be a part of this second conversation, because the group that we're about to bring up now is a group of practitioners, really expert practitioners, who, as Roberto said earlier, are at the heart of this whole endeavor. And they have agreed to come and share their experiences with us, talk frankly about their challenges and their victories and their needs, and we're really excited to have them here. So I will give you a quick overview as they come up to the podium in order. But then they'll obviously share a little bit more about themselves, their experiences, where they are, and how they work every day to sort of combine these strategies to improve student learning. So first we have Chelsea Jones, who is an instructional guide at the Two Rivers Public Charter School, a high-performing expeditionary learning school here in DC. For 9 years, Chelsea has worked to provide rich learning experiences for students and teachers as a lead classroom teacher, a reading coach, and most recently as a member of the instructional leadership team at Two Rivers. So we're excited to hear about your experiences and although you have not been part of the Learning Studios work, clearly your school is an exemplar of an interesting combination of these strategies we've been talking about today. So thank you. Next, we have Mary Weller. Mary is the coordinator of secondary science in the Howard County Public School Systems here in Maryland, or there in Maryland, where she supervises the science instructional program for grades 6 through 12, as well as STEM and environmental literacy initiatives in the district. Mary is also a member of Maryland's Next Generation Science Standards Implementation Team, which we're hoping she will talk about today because it's a good example of collaboration across districts working in response to the new science standards. Mary is also a past president of both the Maryland Science Supervisors Association and the Maryland Association of Science Teachers. And Mary has been involved in the Learning Studios work almost since the very beginning in various capacities, and has seen how that work has evolved over time, and has also been, I would say, a pioneer in figuring out how to bring in outside content experts and encourage them to work with the teaching teams over the years. So we're thrilled to have you here. Thank you. And last but not least, I lost my page here. Hold on. Chelsea Berry, thank you, is the STEM teacher coordinator at Central High School in Prince George's County, also in Maryland, and a former biology teacher, as well as a doctoral candidate at Howard University School of Education in the Education Leadership and Policy Studies program. Her work in Prince George's County and her doctoral work is focused on increasing access to STEM learning and career experiences for high school students. And from her bio, it's very clear, you have it in front of you, but it's very clear that her life's work is to increase opportunities for students and introduce them to many avenues for potential future success in college and career. So thank you for being here. So we'll start out now with just a brief overview of your experience and goals for your work with students. Yes, please.
So I think what I find to be incredibly exciting about this morning, and looking over my notes, what normally would cause me to revise is that the same message is being repeated across presentations. And we're talking about doing things similarly across states and districts and schools and systems and organizations. And normally I would think like, eek, I need to change what I'm going to talk about. But I think for today, repeating is what's powerful, because it feels like we are coming together on an approach that is impactful and powerful for students and teachers. And so at Two Rivers, we are an expeditionary learning school, which essentially means that we believe in digging deep into content. We have a problem-based learning design, which is our vehicle for helping students develop in-depth understanding of content, concepts, and skills. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about how we support teachers in that work. And you'll hear some of the themes of collaboration. And we don't have professional learning communities, but our structures and what we find to be valuable is very similar. So I think what's very important is, in order to develop environments for productive learning among students, it's critical that we do the same thing for our teachers. And my work as an instructional guide is to support and promote teachers' learning. Our mission at Two Rivers, a piece of it is that students become lifelong active participants in their own education. And my job as an instructional guide is to promote the lifelong active learning among our teachers in order to support outcomes for students. It always drives back to the students, but we really want to work on our teachers being learners, our teachers embracing what it means to critically analyze data and to investigate questions and to see themselves as experts in this work too. And we have some whole school structures that support that. Each year, our school develops an instructional focus, which is informed by student data, conversations with teachers, really looking at anecdotal, quantitative, and qualitative evidence of what we've been doing and where we need to go. And it's essentially a question of practice or an area of inquiry where we feel like doing this work would enhance outcomes for students. And after we determine our instructional focus, we embark as a whole school on a year-long journey of learning. As a whole school, we begin to research. We begin to collect student data. We analyze together. We develop strategies from it. And this is across grade levels. We have preschool teachers that are working with 8th grade teachers on the same question of practice, which really catalyzes our work in creating this, we call it at our school the continuous journey. That is not just in one grade where we're pushing on in-depth understanding. It is across all our grades that teachers and students are really focusing on this thing together. And we call it a DAS loop, which is a data analysis strategy loop, where we find the data, collect the data, we analyze it, and then we produce some strategies around our instructional focus. Determining an instructional focus does a few things for us. It lets us know where we need to allocate our resources, and that's time for us being one of the most valuable resources we have. We spend a lot of time together in this work and this thinking. The collective effort also allows us to build shared understanding and shared leadership. The bank of knowledge is not held with a principal or an instructional guide or one expert. We feel across the school that we are all learning this and we are all digging in and developing our expertise and how to expand outcomes for our students. And additionally, it serves to help us build greater traction around the goals. It's amazing when you can hear kinders talking about how they dig into problem-based tasks as well as 7th graders. It's really powerful when we pick a strategy and we're working on it and you can see the journey amongst all grades. It's powerful work for teachers and it's powerful work for students too. It actually, and this was mentioned before, it is our own PBT, and that's a problem-based task. It's our own one every single year. And similarly to the ones in the classrooms, it's messy and it's ill-structured. It is a question for which we don't know the answer. And we're really transparent as a leadership team that this is a question we need to dig in together. We don't have the answer and we're just waiting to get you on board. We really are working on it together. And so this professional structure that we have whole school really does allow us to share in a collective learning experience that then filters into weekly common planning times amongst the grade level, also into instructional practice and things that we have in our school called learning labs, which sound a little like your learning studios, actually, where teachers open up their classroom and invite other staff members in to share in a question that's particular to them, but still drives back to the instructional focus. And we dig in with this teacher, and that teacher provides an opportunity for us to learn, but also they receive some coaching too around it. I was asked today to also talk a little bit about some levers for success, how we take our whole school efforts and make them successful in our classrooms. And a part of that, which I think is incredibly important, is the culture of learning among your teachers and among your students. The students understanding and teachers understanding that mindset is powerful. And that's a part of grappling. That's a part of inquiry. When you are presenting students with these challenging academic contents and you're allowing them to dig into novel problems and tasks, it is about perseverance. It is about grappling. It is about developing and having some grit to dig into the work. And our teachers and our students develop that. And we spend a lot of time, the first 6 weeks of school actually, just building a culture for problem-based learning in the classroom. And we find that that really helps teachers in one grade level, and then as they get students from the next, that they come in having this kind of invested knowledge that, oh, I know what the growth mindset is already. I've got one already, and I can use it when the work gets really hard. Additionally, I think having a balanced approach to instruction is very important. Problem-based learning is exciting, and it provides students opportunities to really dig deep and study to build a depth of understanding rather than a breadth of content knowledge. But that's not the only approach to learning that is powerful and important. Students do still need opportunities for direct instruction. They do still need opportunities for differentiated learning, where you have them in smaller groups and targets are tailored directly to their needs. And so it's about building teachers' capacity to design and implement problem-based tasks, but also to design and implement balanced instruction across the week. We get a lot of questions when people visit Two Rivers, like, do you ever tell children answers? Or do they just study messy problems all the time? And I think that's a misconception about problem-based learning, that it is all no answers and deep thinking. In order for students to dig in deep and really understand concepts in a way that develops expert thinking in a discipline area, they really do also need the basic skills and knowledge. If students are going to grapple with complex text, they also need to know how to read complex text. And so that balanced approach to instruction is very, very important. Our school, when we decided to shift to putting problems at the heart of our learning expedition, spent 4 years in an instructional focus of how do we create and facilitate tasks that develop in-depth understanding for students. And at the end of a 4-year journey, we are moving forward into thinking about how we communicate our understanding in writing, but we have such a rich bank of ideas. And by putting teachers in the position of leadership and really developing a shared understanding, our work feels sustainable. It's not housed in one teacher's knowledge or one person or one leader. It's really in our water, and everyone's swimming in it, and it feels really good. And so I'd say that making sure that you provide structures for whole school knowledge building and capacity building is really important.
Thank you. That was wonderful. I love this. I love this digging in for the continuous journey language. I think that's really helpful because, as we all know, this is a hard, long slog. So it's nice to be able to have that conversation openly. I also love what you said about this idea of teachers being empowered and working in a collaborative environment is what will lead to sustainability. I think sometimes we talk about sustainability as coming from the outside, that someone else will help sustain this. But what you're saying is really important because it's really the teachers being invested in doing this work that'll lead to sustainability. So thank you very much. I'm sure there are lots of questions developing in people's minds right now. So Chelsea, would you share?
Absolutely. Thank you all for the opportunity to provide a perspective from the ground, because sometimes there's a disconnect between concepts and the actual practice, because now I actually have a substitute teacher in my classroom, so I'm in the trenches as well as having the experience as the science teacher coordinator and the STEM academic coordinator. I do still teach, and so I appreciate the opportunity to give you all information from this lens, this side of the fence. As far as my role in Prince George's County, I serve as a science teacher coordinator in Central High School. And it's in this capacity that I serve as a liaison between the teachers within the science department as well as the administrators. So whatever concerns, whatever issues, those things are mediated primarily through me, as well as aligning the budget with the department needs and the teachers' desires as well. And I also coordinate professional development for the teachers as well as collaborative planning. And my work with NCTAF has been really important because it's helped me perform better at this capacity as a science teacher coordinator as well as a science teacher. I was introduced to NCTAF in April of 2010, so I have a few years in, and I appreciate it. We were approached, my principal and I, along with some of our colleagues, were approached by a panel of NCTAF representatives and introduced the Race to the Top concept to each of us, and we were very excited about it. We developed our team within our school, and we also decided upon which students would be a perfect match for this effort, this initiative. You know, we have International Baccalaureate, we have Advanced Placement, we have French Immersion, all of these other initiatives that are in place within the school system, but we wanted to target students who may not be involved in these advanced courses or these tracks that are highly sought after. We selected a heterogeneous group of students from 9th to 10th grade to participate in the NCTAF Learning Studios, or our STEM team at Central High School. And when I tell you all that the people, the students, the parents are so excited about being a part of this effort, there is a waiting list. We had to have a cutoff number. Students come up every single year. Can I join the STEM team? Can I be a part of it? And sometimes we have to turn them away because we've reached our capacity. Because of the work that we've done with NCTAF, the examples, the activities, the instruments that NCTAF and the support systems that they've provided, the students are very excited about the problem-based learning. And the teachers, the relationships that Dr. Lowry mentioned, are not only with the students, they're with our colleagues as well as the outside content experts. So everyone is really, really excited about it, and so am I. I'll give you all a quick synopsis of what our experience with NCTAF is. Each quarter in our school year is broken into 4 quarters, not semesterized like the upper levels, the college levels. So there are 4 quarters, and in these 4 quarters we have design sessions where every NCTAF team within our school system, Prince George's County, comes together and we collaborate. Our professional learning communities become strengthened because of these design sessions. It's a full day of collaboration. We have our substitute teachers. We are off campus so that our focus is exclusively on the task at hand. We're able to interact with other teams within our school system. We're also able to collaborate with the outside content experts, which is monumental and really important for the work that we do within the schools, because resources and funding is definitely an issue. So having access to the outside content experts has proven to be very instrumental in the success of our STEM team. Now, that was it as it relates to our teachers collaborating. The STEM team at Central High School is successful for these reasons that I'll mention. We host a series of Voices from the Field workshops where those outside content specialists come in. We've even networked with our own individual partnerships, whether it's a dentist or a physician or even an attorney. They come in and they have conversations with our students. They show them what a STEM career looks like. They talk about their journey to get to where they're going. The students have that intimate environment with them where they can ask those questions that are really burning in them. How did you do this? What did you do to get to that? What does this even mean? We may talk about STEM being science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, but what is engineering? What is an engineer? What is a quality assurance engineer? What is a mechanical engineer, a chemical engineer? So we have these people come in and talk to the students and give them information on what their job entails. I was very excited when Ms. Donna came up and gave her information about Encore, because that is so important to the work of moving students toward going into the direction of having STEM careers. We talk about global competitive status in the United States and driving our workforce, diversifying our workforce. This is the way that we do it. We show them what it looks like so that they can develop that interest in it, and that's one of the things that we do. We also have what we call STEM Trip Wednesdays. We try a couple of STEM trips a month where the students are not only being exposed to what STEM opportunities exist, but they're also problem-based learning STEM trips or field trips. And I'll give you an example. One year, our students took a trip to the Botanic Gardens in DC. and there are no solar panels, and that's our theme. Our theme is energy conservation, how to make solar energy economical. And so we visited the U.S. Botanic Gardens, and we learned that there are no solar panels there. And so the students were tasked with figuring out or developing a plan for implementation if they had solar panels. And if money wasn't an object, resources are infinite, how would you install these solar panels? What would be your rationale for installing these? How would they be installed? Would they be on the roof? Would they be in the jungle part of the Botanic Gardens? So it's problem-based learning as well. We also participated in DNA Day. We collaborated with the National Institutes of Health and the Human Genome Anniversary. And so the students were able to visit the Natural History Museum and participate in that discussion, ask questions to a panel of doctoral fellowship students, as well as those who are in the field. They were able to really interact with them. The STEM trips are also for exposure. We visit the Koshland Science Museum. We have visited Baltimore Aquarium, the Maryland Science Center, as well as another problem-based learning activity that they've done as a field excursion. We visited Harbor Place, which is in the city of Baltimore, the Inner Harbor. The students had to interview the businesses, the managers, those who were working there at the time, asking them what types of green efforts is your business employing to make this place better. They introduced the employees, a lot of times they introduced them to what green was, because some of the employees were clueless. And so it ended up being a learning opportunity for them, the student, as well as the employee, because they were forcing those employers to think about what their practices are within their business, because our theme is making solar energy economical. So as you run your establishment, what could you be doing better? And so the students had a grand time with that. Those are just a few of the really exciting things that NCTAF has served as a catalyst in allowing us to support our students with. In addition to that, we have general assemblies where we meet with the students. Remember I said it's a heterogeneous group. And so that's 9th through 12th. That means we cannot have, all right, first period is going to be especially designated for STEM, because the students are all over the place. There's 9 through 12. And so with the support of our administrators, we have general assemblies so that we pull our students together for a period of the day. And we have our STEM chat series. We also have had permission to have a couple of STEM days where the entire day is associated or focused on that problem-based learning, that activity, that task, that question that the students are answering. And because we have that team of interdisciplinary specialists on the committee of STEM, we are able to allow the students to look at STEM in different perspectives. Each of the members have a different strength. For instance, I'm in the sciences. Another person may be the technology coordinator. We've even had one of our health teachers participate on our STEM committee. And with those strengths, we've had the media come out and capture some of the events that the students are working on. And I mean print media. The students are featured in the newspaper. The students are on television. They see themselves. So they're really getting excited. But back to the STEM day. We took over the auditorium and the gym. And this is just one example. And the students are given an overarching essential question. Then they are divided into several teams in which they're answering a sub-question. For instance, those variables in those sub-questions could be, what are the effects of cloud coverage on solar energy production? Another variable could be the time of day. What is the effect of the time of day on energy production via a solar panel? The arrangement of the solar panels, the angle of the solar panels. So they're answering these questions. This work is not possible without the help of our outside content experts. One year we partnered very closely with the Department of Energy. One of the Albert Einstein fellows really worked with us, and it was amazing because of the resources. We are just a regular public school with a population of about 1,000 students. We have a regular budget. And sometimes that budget does not warrant us the opportunity to have access to the materials needed to answer these problem-based tasks. And so with the collaboration with representatives from the Department of Energy, we were able to obtain supplies and equipment so that the students could have a full day of implementation. We were able to partner with Howard University, Strayer University, Department of Energy, the NEED Project, all types of partnerships because of what NCTAF embedded within us. And although the grant has ended, the Race to the Top funding has expired, what has been established thus far, we aren't really concerned solely on funding because we have the foundation. We know what we can do. We've established our network. We know who we can reach out with. We've had that time to develop curriculum mapping, what resources are needed so that we can start early. In the design sessions, and I know that I'm going back and forth because I'm really excited about it. With the design sessions that we have quarterly, not only are we able to collaborate with our colleagues and the outside content specialists, but we also have the opportunity to perform curriculum mapping. And in curriculum mapping, we are able to align Common Core state standards, next generation science standards, our own state standards with our specific task. And that information, that time that was taken for us to learn how to curriculum map, we can take back to our schools. And in my capacity as a science teacher coordinator, I can then forward those skills to the people within my department. And also serving as a professional development lead teacher, I can forward on to the other personnel within the school building about what curriculum mapping looks like, the importance of curriculum mapping, how it keeps you on task, how it ensures that the students will be prepared for those PARCC assessments, how the teachers are understanding how to even unpack a Common Core state standard. So the work, the foundation has been monumental in several ways, not only with the students, but as well as with the professionals within the organization. Now, I know I've tooted the horn of NCTAF very well. However, there are some hindrances that I like to bring to the carpet, which is another reason why I thank you all for the opportunity of giving you the perspective from someone from the ground. Because, again, there's a disconnect between concept and practice. Sometimes it sounds really good, but when it comes to implementing, there are a few kinks and hiccups that have to be worked out. One of the things that I recommend, and again, I really stress how important I believe that Encore's work is, because sometimes those outside content experts aren't available to really provide the type of support that we need. During those quarterly design sessions, they're there a couple of hours, and that's great. But when the teams of teachers need that support at the school, their schedules may not allow it, permit it. Sometimes when we need those resources to actually implement those activities that we discussed during the design sessions and in the curriculum mapping, they aren't available. They aren't able to provide those resources. We lucked up having access to that Albert Einstein Fellowship representative from the Department of Energy. We were so excited. However, that next year, her fellowship ended, which meant that we had to really struggle to find a workforce partner that could meet our needs. So that's something that we could possibly work on. Also, having those workforce partners available to even come to the schools to interact with the students. And I understand that their schedules are busy, which is again why I stress the importance of the Encore Fellowship that Ms. Donna mentioned, because they're going into that aspect of the arena that we desperately need them. Because sometimes the teams of teachers who work with NCTAF or work on these STEM teams, our area of expertise is not mechanical engineering. It's not statistical analyses. So we don't have that background. We don't know that. We teach a curriculum, and yes, we have our professional development where we gain insight to the newest and most updated trends in education. However, when it comes to implementing the problem-based task via problem-based learning, we may not have the know-how And so having that relationship and collaboration with outside content experts is really important. And so with that, I'll stop. I may have exceeded my time, and I apologize, but I wanted to
I
get
think
it
we can
out.
all just go home now. We're done. No, I love this because, I mean, so many times you are at these meetings and you ask people what their challenges are.
Right.
And they do the sort of job interview kind of challenges where it's really a strength, but it's not actually a recommendation. So I think that is very helpful. And you've actually, we at NCTAF really appreciate all the all the kind words, but you also you gave such clear examples of how this looks at the classroom level and what it means to the teachers and the students. I think, you know, we're getting to this exemplar, this group of exemplars that are so important. So thank you very much. And next, we'd love to hear from you, Mary, about the district, your district level experience.
Well, great, and thank you, and good morning to everyone. And as has been said by everyone who's preceded me, it's a real pleasure to be here today, but let me also be clear that I am deeply humbled to be sitting before you today to share with you my story. And I think that's about all that I can possibly do, is to share with you some of the stories that we in Howard County have lived through over the years, and the ones that we're planning for the future. Because as Dr. Lowry made very clear, this is an exciting time in education. It's exhilarating in education, and it keeps us up at night sometimes. But it is a pleasure to be here. And I guess there's this one brain cell that's firing continuously, hoping that I'm not the non-example of success that's been called up here. Don't do what Mary does. So, as has been said, I am here from Howard County, Maryland, and Howard County is in the central part of Maryland. We're a medium-sized district of about 52,000 students, and traditionally a very high-performing district, and yet a district that's undergoing significant change in terms of the students that we're serving every single day. We are seeing increased poverty, we're seeing increased diversity, and increased challenges. And to say that we're a high-performing district, I think, is absolutely accurate. However, when we start looking at individual students, we find that there are significant and pervasive gaps in student achievement. And these are gaps that we are very much trying to close. And not close by holding one group steady and bringing another group up, but instead by moving everyone up and ensuring that everybody really is prepared for that unknown future that awaits each of our young people. Within Howard County, within the past few years, we have really done some significant self-examination, and we have reestablished our vision and our mission. And I think that it's very important that I make that clear to folks what it is that we're about in Howard County. We worked very closely with our community and with everyone within the schools to develop our vision and mission. And my paraphrase of it is that every student is inspired to learn and empowered to excel within a vibrant learning community. And we have, to support that vision and that mission, 4 goals. And the goals speak to many different players within the school system. One is certainly the students, ensuring that every student is in a position to achieve academic excellence for the future. Ensuring that all staff are engaged and supported in the work that they do each day. Ensuring that families and the community are partners in the endeavor of helping students towards learning. And finally, ensuring that we are in an efficiently run, well-organized structure. And when I hear that vision and that mission, and I think about all of those goals, I recognize that really the work that we've done with NCTAF, the work that we are striving to do related to project and problem-based learning really wraps all of those things together. I'm going to call it a neat little package, but we know it's not because there are things squirting out from the sides, right? It's not very neat. It's messy. Learning is very messy, and we've heard that reiterated over and over today. But importantly, at the center of that package is the student, and we've got to make sure that we are keeping that student at the center as we make decisions and move forward. It's clear from what we've heard today, and it's clear from the work that I do each day or try to do each day, that formulas aren't going to work The one learning studio formula will not be the silver bullet for all that ails us, but it is perhaps one. And there are lots of lessons that can be learned, taken away, and applied in new contexts. Because as was said earlier today, the idea of a professional learning community is really project-based learning for teachers. And so I think that's a very good comparison for us to bear in mind. So how do we make it work, I guess, is really the role that I'm intended to try and shed some light on today. And I guess my answer is I don't know. But here's what I try to communicate to the people with whom I work daily, is that, you know, learning, this complex thing called learning, it's really like a very complex tapestry that can be woven together over time. And this tapestry, in order to be woven, really needs a loom on which to be woven. And I guess I think of myself and my colleagues in the district office and our colleagues at the buildings in the forms of principals and other administrators, that we're really the ones who must construct that loom. We design that loom and we construct it, not in isolation from what the users of that loom need, but it's really my responsibility to ensure that there is a loom that's there, that's solid, that can be flexible, and that's ready to operate. And once we have that loom, then, you know, we can string on the warp. Those are the pieces on a loom that you can think of as going longitudinally. And those are really kind of our standards, or perhaps our performance expectations when we think about next generation science standards. But it's really my job to make sure that those learning outcomes are well understood and are strung well and securely in place, because they must be in place in order for the weaving of this tapestry to begin. But then, this is where my analogy, I think, has some shortcomings, because usually when we see someone who's weaving a tapestry, we see an isolated individualist who's working that loom. And I don't want to give the idea that that's really what I'm intending here. Instead, I'm picturing a really big loom that one person can't possibly operate, right? And so we've got lots of folks who are taking that loom and making it operate, and beginning to take that shuttle, and with the weft going back and forth and over and under and making that design. And those are the teachers. Those are those outside content experts that can really give that advice and that insightful viewpoint of, you know, I really think you should go over the fourth instead of over the third in order to make the design very real. It's the students who are also helping to move that shuttle through the loom. And, you know, it's the families and others who are going to contribute to that as well. But the only way that the weaving of that tapestry can possibly occur is if, in fact, we've got the things in place that allow us to make good decisions, allow us to have access to resources, and allow us to move forward. And, you know, sometimes the tapestry can be really intricate, really involved. Sometimes it might just be one of those little pot holders that you make when you're 5. But either way, ultimately, the weaving has occurred, and I think that when we're weaving those tapestries, we're doing something that's different than the way that schooling has been done in the past. And we must continue. We have to be persistent. We have to be really focused on ensuring that we can do this. And I think we also have to make sure that we celebrate, because the making of that pot holder may be just right for a teacher's or a teaching group's first foray into project-based learning, but that's okay. Look, you made the pot holder, now let's make something more. And that's ultimately where we want to build capacity among our teachers, so that they can be flexible thinkers, so that they can take all of the tools in their toolbox or tool belt and apply them to the situations that will come their way in order to help the students do that. I guess as I close, you know, I mentioned before the importance of the student at the center. And so as I take this metaphor of the weaving of the tapestry to its conclusion, you know, my younger son, whose birthday is today, he turns 11, But he, for much of his life, he'd kill me if he knew I was telling people this, but for much of his life, he's had this blankie, right? We've all had these blankies, and it's a very comforting sort of blankie. You wrap yourself in this blankie, and it just makes you feel good no matter what the temperature is. And I'd like to think that the learning experiences that we provide to students, especially when they're rich, like what we're describing here in the terms of project-based learning, and where teachers feel supported and safe to take risks, and we're all learning side by side. I hope that those learning experiences can be a bit like that blankie, but we've woven it on that loom that was described earlier. So with that,
Thank
I'm
you.
done.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I like it's freezing in here, so I like the blankie metaphor. I also would say that I think maybe we need to change the term we're using from exemplars to, examples of improvement and continuous effort, because I think you're all definitely showing us that it's not a one-size-fits-all model. It's not a silver bullet. It is working every day in your context with your students and teachers. And so we really do appreciate you sharing all these, all your stories. Do we we have time for questions? Okay. So we'd love to take some questions from you all. Oh, sorry. Here's the mic.
I'm Dorian Janney, and I work at NASA. I was a teacher, a public school teacher for 33 years, and gosh, it's really nice to hear. It was nice to hear the theoretical parts and the percentages and everything, but it's really nice to hear the voices from the trenches. So thank you so much. And I know, especially having been a teacher, all the lesson plans you have to create and then get back to and take care of. But here's my question. So now I work at NASA, and I was a part of the NCTAF, learning studios, and loved it. One of the places where I see this problem, perhaps, is that there's so many schools that we would like to go and work in, and there's so few of us who are able to or to really get to that place where we can meet the developmental needs and the school needs. Using technology, we're able to hopefully meet a lot more, go to a lot more schools via virtual technology, webinars, that sort of thing. But I'm wondering, is that enough? What are your feelings from being in the trenches, if you don't have the actual physical presence of the external content expert? If they were to instead interact with you via the teachers and the students via, technology, webinars, emails, that sort of thing, is that enough? Do we know yet? Because that adds to our leverage, efforts, and that's kind of where the push is to have greater leverage. But perhaps it takes away that individual and that very important relationship. I don't have the answer, so that's why I'm asking you.
I'd like to respond. I think that it's not enough. I really don't, unless, and I say that with contingencies, because if there are technologies that are in place, such as Blackboard Connect, or even as simple as Skyping, where it's not a simple webinar where I'm looking at you and you can't see me, where I think that's where the disconnect is, because then the students may in turn feel as if they're being lectured to, and that's the opposite of problem-based learning. Whereas if it is a software or technological something that allows the students to perform a distance learning interaction with the outside content expert while they are in the classroom setting, where we may have the materials set up in different stations, and you're interacting with us about what do we do now? It's as if you're there, but you're not. And so the students can then say, hold up, I don't understand, I have a question. And you're able to answer that question. You're able to walk them through. And it's not alleviating the need of the teacher there. It's supplementing what we already have. And I think that becomes a tool that we can use to reinforce, to strengthen what we already have. And so the technology is great, but I think if used properly, it's greater.
I'd
like to add on to that. I think it's a combination of supporting teachers in their planning of learning experiences as well as working with students. And so I think there's some front loading that we can do with experts in the field, and also with helping teachers as they plan for problem-based learning or any content area learning. How do we uncover discipline-specific knowledge, things that make the difference between a novice in that field and an expert, and then whittle that down to what's appropriate for them as far as development is concerned. You know, we do chemistry with fifth graders, and there are powerful scientific ideas in that, and then there are ones that are totally appropriate for them as fifth graders too. So you make these distinctions between what is the expert knowledge that is transferable, that's developmentally appropriate, and also incredibly engaging for them, and the use of experts in that planning and helping teachers to really tease out what is the difference between knowing chemistry as a novice and knowing chemistry as an expert, and how do we communicate that to students. Those become the big ideas of your expedition, and that becomes the anchor of your work. And so using experts on the front end with planning, I think, would be incredibly powerful also.
Could that be done online, or does that need to be face-to-face?
No, I think the use of technology there is incredibly powerful, and that can be done online, that can be done through where you are, just numerous modes of communication. What I think is impactful is if you work twofold on empowering teachers to do this type of planning and thinking, as well as then how do we strategically use experts? Kind of this idea of the biggest bang for your buck, because you can't be there in the classroom every day. But there are critical experiences that we would love for you to join us for. There are interviews that we would love to have you there for, but how do we plan for that and have a knowledge of what you do best to help us do what we do best? I think if you approach it in both of those ways, it could be, you get more leverage for your efforts.
Hi there. Thank you all for your comments. My name is Beth Glenn. I'm with a group called the Alliance for Smart Schools, Systems, and Communities. So Mary, hearing your 4 goals really resonates with us. My question was for Chelsea, and other folks can speak to it as well. I was wondering if you do anything special in terms of inboarding or induction for your new educators when they come in to kind of sensitize them to this different way of working that they might not be familiar with otherwise.
So we do a few things, because we sometimes feel like it's a different world where we are, and we want teachers to be successful in joining us. Our teachers actually are leading great innovative work in our school about documenting core instructional practices. And through a small teacher and administrative leadership team, they are videotaping teachers and creating kind of a series of learning experiences for them. We also spend 3 weeks in orientation at the beginning of the year, and that first part of it is relational trust, transactional trust. It is about understanding our practices and being able to feel like you can collaborate. Our entire first week of orientation is about understanding yourself as a learner and contributing to the team, and really being able to adopt some practices that help you collaborate, because a big part of our messy work is minds, and being more minds in the room is more powerful. And so we spend a lot of time in the beginning of the year working primarily on how do we work as a team and how do we trust each other in this messy, ill-structured problem-solving environment. And those are some whole school things we do, and there are a few other things like I lead professional development workshops. We have a series of math learning workshops that are open also to people outside of our school, where we ask people to come in and learn a little more about problem-based learning and how we do this, and how you develop a culture of learning like this in your school. And so we're trying to make sure we onboard teachers and are able to do this work.
So just a follow-up question about turnover. I noticed you said you took 4 years to talk about your lesson planning, and so how do you handle
When people leave us, yeah, we cry. Institutional knowledge is important, and housing institutional knowledge is important. We do truly believe that we don't want to necessarily take all of our teachers out of the classroom, but we have a track within our school where if I was a classroom teacher and spent 6 years as a classroom teacher, one of our vice principals began as an assistant teacher. And so we certainly believe in our leaders are the people who have invested in this work and also have the institutional knowledge about how to do it. And we become, kind of guides for this also. So we, other than being sad, that's what we do.
I think we have time for one more question. Okay. Or comment?
I just wanted to acknowledge your concern and also acknowledge that across all of the Encore career work, the idea of creating a platform where you can identify the needs that you have and Encore careerists can seek out those needs, that idea of matchmaking is one of the biggest challenges that we're facing. And so I think pursuing that would be helpful. And I'm here also not only to share, but to report back to those people at the national level what some of the issues are that we can continue to work on, and I will do that on your behalf.
Thank you. And it's actually a great segue into the next part of our conversation. So please join me in thanking this wonderful panel. Really appreciate it. And Melinda will talk more about this later, but we do have a way to continue this conversation through an online chat later on this afternoon if you're interested and have a lot of extra time. So now it's really my pleasure to introduce Dr. Brad Emmerling, who is a principal research scientist with Pearson Research and Innovation Network, the Center for Educator Learning and Effectiveness. And Brad has really been a wonderful partner to the NCTAF Learning Studios team and teachers, and has been conducting some research about how the outside content experts have been working with the teams and what the professionals and teachers have to say about the experience and their suggestions for future work. I'd also like to introduce Don Glass, who's in the back of the room. He is the NCTAF Learning Studios Evaluation Director and has been working really closely with Brad on this particular project. So I'll just give you a brief intro about Brad. He spent 7 years working as an educator in Japan, where he developed firsthand knowledge and expertise with Japanese lesson study, and has published numerous articles on developing and supporting learning systems for collaborative inquiry and continuous learning. And I know that his most recent article is one called Between the Desks, which looks at what teachers are doing in that time when they're circulating between students and what their work continues to look like at that level of interactions with the students. Dr. Emmerling was a recipient of the 2010 Best Research Award from Learning Forward for published studies on instructional improvement through learning teams. He is currently conducting qualitative studies on blended and virtual assistance models, to your earlier question, and will present today his findings from his study of the Learning Studios outside content experts. So please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I want to thank NCTAF also for the opportunity to partner with them in this research on teacher team outside expert partnerships, and for the opportunity to share some of the results of that research with you this morning. If we could switch over to my PowerPoint slides, that would be terrific. There we go. So the goal of my presentation this morning is to provide you with a synopsis of the study that we've been working on. I'll give you a synopsis of the purpose, the rationale, and the context for this study, followed by a summary of our findings, which we're actually releasing today as part of a condensed report in collaboration with NCTAF that'll be made available on both of our websites. And those same findings and the overall study are currently under review with a scientific journal, which we anticipate being published sometime in 2015. There are many aspects of education that we do not have definitive evidence for. But one area where we do have substantial evidence, both from national and international studies, is that teaching practices are difficult to change. And one primary reason for this is that teachers construct visions of classroom practice based on long-standing cultural routines and preconceived notions of effective instruction. Even in collaborative contexts, there is a ceiling effect as to how much we can gain and expand our visions of practice within our own school context and culture. And these limited horizons of observation, as some authors have referred to them, represent the boundaries of those instructional options that teachers consider, and the boundaries of the possibilities and solutions that teachers construct as they work to improve their practice. So in this particular project that we've been working on, that I've been partnering with Don Glass and others on in our study, we explored the possibility of how we might engage teacher teams in collaboration with these outside experts as a way to expand those horizons of observation. What might that look like? Specifically leveraging NCTAF's Learning Studios model as a context for the research. As we've already discussed today, the teacher participants in the NCTAF Learning Studios model have the opportunity to partner with researchers and scientists from outside organizations to engage students in these year-long project-based learning, problem-based learning investigations with students. And so our goal in this research was to explore whether, in fact, those partnerships can expand the knowledge, the professional knowledge that teachers have, and help modify some of these enduring images of classroom instruction. What does that look like? In terms of design, we conducted 2 case studies, and our goal was to start with, for the purposes of this research, 2 successful examples. When this is working, when these partnerships are richly formed, and they're operating at the level that we've hypothesized would be beneficial, what does that look like so that we can learn from those examples? We conducted 2 case studies from a high school and a middle school. Both were from an urban school district in Maryland. The high school teachers were working on a project called Tomato Sphere, which focused on survival needs for extended space exploration. The students in this project were conducting an experiment where they compared germination rates and plant growth for primed and unprimed tomato seeds. And as part of the project, the teachers developed a partnership with a research fellow from the National Institute for Health and asked for her assistance in designing a lesson where they could help students explore the role of lycopene in human health. In our middle school project that we studied, the teachers were working on an experiment that involved green energy and thermodynamics. They designed a roof color experiment where students were going to be investigating which colors reflect and absorb the most heat. And so they specifically had students place paint color into cups of water that was directly exposed to the sun, and then measure temperature changes for 4 different colors. Later then, the students used the results of that experiment to determine the exterior paint color that they could use for the design of green buildings. And as part of their project, the teachers developed a partnership with a science education consultant. So we followed these 2 cases very closely over the past year, observing, recording, transcribing the planning conversations that teachers were having with the outside experts during their design sessions. We also collected work products and correspondence to see what that sounded like even between sessions, and we conducted interviews and focus groups. And as we followed these emerging narratives and analyzed the transcripts, we especially focused our attention on what we called episodes of uptake. Uptake was defined as a discernible shift in the pattern of discourse evidenced by heightened teacher interest, curiosity, or engagement in response to the outside content expert. And so we took these episodes where there was uptake and we coded them in one of two categories. Either they were intermittent and short-lived, a quick conversation that didn't really lead to a lot of profound or important change in thinking, or sustained pivotal episodes that might represent these expanded horizons. Now, just to give you an accurate representation of the study and what we observed, most of the episodes were of the short-lived intermittent variety. Most of the conversations had that kind of quick pace where there was an opportunity there, but then it would pass, and they were not sustained interactions. However, each case had several episodes of these sustained interactions, and so these sustained episodes were further analyzed and triangulated through our interviews and focus groups to determine whether they represented and qualified as evidence of teachers expanding horizons for their instructional plans. And so we used two criteria for this analysis. First, we looked for evidence that the instructional approach the teachers selected was notably different than what they might have otherwise pursued on their own. Second, we looked for evidence that the insider approach was directly oriented to a key learning goal or fundamental skill related to the curriculum. And again, we found at least a couple of cases in both of these studies where there was evidence for both of these criteria. Evidence that, in fact, the outside expert was expanding the horizons of options that teachers incorporated in their instructional plans. So let me tell you about those stories of what that looked like. Going back to our high school case, remember the tomato sphere? Remember that the outside expert was helping to design a lesson where they would explore the role of lycopene in human health. Well, this outside expert spent time doing her own research in between sessions and explored all of the evidence around lycopene and discovered that, in fact, many of the claims around lycopene were quite oversimplified, according to the evidence in the literature. She brought this finding back to the teachers through email and through their conversations. And the teachers had a choice. We can kind of gloss over this evidence, stick with our existing instructional plan, which was to talk about lycopene as this promising way to provide for long-term survival in space. Or we could approach it another way. With the help of the outside expert, the team ended up deciding to turn this into a critical thinking opportunity for students. And as a result of the partnership, they designed a lesson where now the students were going to grade scientific abstracts on lycopene and evaluate the quality of the experimental design in these abstracts themselves, directly do the same thing she did over the summer. And so here's a couple of quotes I brought in for you today from the actual teachers as they discussed the influence of the outside expert. First of all, we realized that students had a weakness when it came to the skills and processes of science. That Maryland State Department of Education goal and indicator specifically. And so she really set up, kind of a foundation for this project, the foundation in experimental design. It's making me reflect and try to figure out ways that I can connect, not just the fundamental conceptual knowledge that they get out of our science topic, but also like how the science is actually done. It's a very quick synopsis of the high school case and the role of the outside expert. In our middle school case, the outside expert provided teachers with an expanded knowledge of measurement principles for thermodynamics and helped them design a valid roof color experiment that would actually be feasible for a 7th grade classroom, which was a new stretch for these teachers to try some of this with 7th grade students. Initially, what the teachers were planning to do in this project was take these cups of water that were going to be exposed to the sun with the paint color. They were going to paint the outside of the cups and use that to measure which colors reflect and absorb the heat. And the outside expert patiently helped the teachers recognize that this would not allow the students to consistently measure the medium they were trying to test, because the outside of these cups would not provide a direct angle of exposure to the sunlight. And so again, through the partnership and through the help of the outside expert, the teachers redesigned the experiment so that students would place paint color chips directly into the water, which would give them a more accurate measurement and allow them to engage in a valid scientific experiment. Here's a couple of quotes this time I brought in from the actual outside expert in our interviews. She says, color where the sun is shining directly on them wouldn't give us a medium, it would give us the sun shining directly on the colored jars. So I needed them to see what we're doing is actually looking at the temperature, following a set of protocols for each medium being the same. I think that they're changing the way they're thinking, but it's not just let's teach how to measure temperature. It's if our electric bill was lower because we have a black roof, does that make a difference? And so students are learning a wide array of different processes through this one project, and I think the teachers themselves are starting to see that aspect of it. We also spend some time analyzing the expert facilitative actions across these two cases. These are two examples of fairly successful partnerships. What were the experts doing? What could we learn from that? And these, we identified three things, three different actions that contributed to these sustained episodes and these expanded horizons of planning. And these are interesting and rather important in terms of the literature on outside experts because they paint a very different portrait of an outside expert than the profile typically documented in most of the existing literature. Rather than operating as purveyors of knowledge, so to speak, these two outside experts did at least three things. First, there was consistent evidence in our observations of the work that these two experts very consistently would spend their time listening and absorbing and gathering and understanding the needs and problems and plans of the team and then adapt their expertise to that local context. That was their mode of operation in every setting, in every conversation. Even though they may have had a lot of things they saw that there were gaps and areas where they needed to make a difference, they started with this idea of adapting to the local context. Secondly, they made a substantial investment in follow-up communication. In our final report in the appendix, we include copies of extensive correspondence, follow-up emails, and contributions that these outside experts made to sustain the work in between the design sessions. And without that, I think a lot of it would have slipped through the cracks. It was quite evident that they were helping be the glue to hold these ideas together. And then third, and probably most profoundly, these outside experts judiciously applied pressure to stretch horizons of practice and to nudge forward thinking in small increments of change. Now, these three are certainly not exclusive of all the inclusive of all of the things we've observed of the characteristics of outside experts, but they were three very common actions that these experts displayed in their efforts to influence these particular cases. And I think they provide some very helpful guidance to STEM program leaders and leaders of collaborative partnerships in general in terms of recruiting, selecting, and training outside experts to partner with teacher teams. We provide some more recommendations on that in the full report. I think it's also important to note that these findings are limited to these two cases. They're not predictive of what we might have seen in every Learning Studios partnership. We can't necessarily make those claims, but we can say this. And we also, by the way, know that the evidence we collected is not of sufficient magnitude or duration to necessarily label them as transformative shifts in practice. But what these two cases provide, which is unique in the literature and the research on this topic, is kind of a first proof of concept for an extended partnership. Most of the research around partnerships are these very short-lived externships. These extended partnerships don't have much description in the literature. So we now have a very clearly documented and clearly described example of what it can look like for an outside expert and an extended partnership to influence the decisions teachers make in their plans around their teaching in these contexts. If you'd like to learn more about some of the details, we will have the report made available on both of our websites, the condensed version. And here's a brief summary of some of the other publications and presentations we have planned for this study. On the 24th, Don and I are going to have the opportunity to be featured on Education Talk Radio. So we're looking forward to that. We're going to be speaking along with Mary Weller at the Learning Forward Conference this December. And then we have a couple of publications that are in process. We have a manuscript under review with JSD Learning Forward's publication for their February issue. We have a proposal under review with AERA, and our full manuscript is on its second round of revision with a peer-reviewed journal. So we'll be posting links and public updates to those publications as they become available. You can follow us on Twitter if you'd like for those updates. And incidentally, if you're interested in the study that we recently completed on virtual coaching, which was brought up here by Dorian, it's a very related study to outside experts and what we've learned about providing assistance through the virtual interface, both the challenges and the possibilities of that context. So look forward to any questions in the small amount of time we have left. But thank you again to NCTAF for the opportunity to partner with them in this study.
Are there any comments you'd like to make that would influence the recruiting and selection process for the experts?
I think so. I think, you know, intentions are very different than actual availability. And I think that's the first place to start with this is, you know, we have a lot of evidence that the ability to follow through and spend a lot of time investing in the needs of the group is what allows an extended partnership to thrive. In fact, originally we chose 4 cases to follow. And one important caveat here is that 2 of the cases just did not even materialize. And they were seen as potentially very successful partnerships. And that wasn't always the outside content experts' fault. In fact, most cases it wasn't. There were policies and politics and other factors that inhibited the groups from being able to sustain that partnership. So the availability to commit to an extended role, not an intermittent role, it would be my first comment. Yes.
Hi, yeah, you answered a part of my question based on his question. I'm kind of curious to know what kind of response do you see from businesses? Earlier somebody was talking about NASA. One of the panelists talked about not knowing the know-how regarding, let's say, mechanical engineering or statistical analysis. So do businesses show sufficient interest when you approach them in terms of engaging their experts so that students have better opportunities?
I don't have as much background with the whole range of experts that NCTAF is partnered with in that regard. I think maybe Don or Elizabeth might be able to speak to that. I know the 2 cases I studied were both government partners, and I've not studied explicitly the business relationship. So perhaps another member of the NCTAF team could address that.
I would just say that what Brad mentioned a moment ago about the sustained long-term relationship is often not what industry partners expect when they have someone available to partner with teachers. They often don't expect more than a 1 or 2 day commitment over the academic year. I think the other challenge has been that this ability to translate a very specific expertise on the industry partner's part to what teachers are trying to convey at a middle school or high school level. So that mismatch is something that one of the reasons that this research is so important is that we think that making a stronger match going into the relationship will help address the sustainability issue.
Well, I really want to thank Brad, and I want to tell you how glad I am that you all got to hear Brad. For the last year that we've worked with Brad and Kathy and his team from Pearson, whoever gets to be in the room when those conversations were happening, we're really lucky because you always learn something. And so it got to be this kind of who gets to go in when Brad's going to be leading the meeting. So I'm glad you all got to hear him. I don't know how many of you all have your own personal education laboratory at home, but I have mine. They don't always like to be my personal education laboratory, and they do not think that I passed all IRB requirements to use them in this manner. But I have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old at home, and as you can imagine, this weekend I was talking a lot about the summit, and I was talking about being nervous, and I was talking about who was coming, and I was talking about what we were going to be talking about. And finally, my 15-year-old said, "Mom, it's all going to be good. Think about who you've been telling me is going to be there, who's going to be speaking and who's going to be attending. You're so lucky. It's all going to be good." And you know what? It was all good. I really appreciate all of you being here today. I'm so thankful to our panelists, to our speakers. What an amazing group of dedicated, passionate folks who are all in this to support education and to support teaching. And what was shared here today will be shared and become part of the learning of our commission. Our commission is led by Secretary Richard Riley and by former ECS President Ted Sanders. And they are really excited about this being the moment in time where we really can make a difference around the teaching profession and we can share a positive message. I also, I'm so lucky to get to sit in that front seat and have everybody talk about NCTAF. And they look right at me and they say, NCTAF is doing this great thing and that great thing. It's not me. I have an amazing team of folks that I work with at NCTAF who make me burst with pride when people talk about NCTAF, but they're really the experts in all this. And I often describe when people say, well, how big is your staff? And I say 6. Their jaws drop because we are small, but we are really mighty. And we do really great things. And so I do want to, you got to meet Elizabeth. We talked a little bit about Don in the back, who's been leading a lot of our evaluation work around Learning Studios. Carrie Burke, many of you all talked to over the last few days and few weeks, as she has really been the brains behind putting this meeting together so that it all ran smoothly. Ryan, raise your hand in the back, has been with NCTAF and helping us to lead all of these efforts and making sure everything runs smoothly. And Sharon Seitz is our newest member of the NCTAF staff. We're really happy to have her as we gear up for this important commission work. She's going to be helping us to make sure everything is managed. So what I would say is that I hope that this Good Teaching Summit has inspired you to continue the 3 themes that NCTAF's commission has asked us to help to do. First, to send a positive message about education. This can be done, it is being done, and it can be done well. And so as we think about the incredible examples that were shared here today, that's something that we need to raise this message, a positive message about education. The second thing is, let's get this message out nationally. We are so pleased to be here with other members of organizations who are doing great things in education. We look forward to partnering with you in the years to come. We want to share more stories, and we want to have those kinds of models and case studies to back up what we know is being done well and to illustrate the conditions that are necessary to have in place. And then thirdly, let's do it collaboratively. I have loved today. It's good for me. Because there's so much good work that is happening in education that's complementary. This idea of collaboration, we could play a game for every time someone said the word collaboration, and that is what we want, and it has to apply at every level, including at the national level, where all of our organizations come together and say, you know what, we all agree on this. Let's push that message together instead of each one of us by ourselves. Let's build on these synergies, let's find points of common intersection, and then let's work together to support good teaching. So Elizabeth mentioned earlier, and I just want to put in a little plug, we are going to have a continuation of this conversation today. We're really pleased to be partnering with Ed Week for an online chat from 4 to 5 today. And if you go to the NCTAF website, nctaf.org, you can find the link to get on. And I'm going to be joined by our other brand new commissioner, who we're really excited about, the superintendent of San Francisco Unified Public Schools, Richard Carranza, who's going to be on this online chat with me, talking about how we support good teaching and how we put in place the conditions needed to support this good teaching. So many thanks to all of you, and I look forward to being in touch and working collaboratively together. Thank you.